Hello there, friends. Welcome back to another episode of Generation Tank. My name is Alan. It's really appealing, this idea that you can just believe in the Force and let it guide your every action. It's nice to be a citizen of the Republic and not worry about your safety and security and just live carefree with your trust fully invested in the Jedi Order. In this way, it's not all that different from people who have blind devotion, to a government system, to a political party, to a religion or a lifestyle. I'm not talking about normal measured belief, but a type of fanaticism, which is rooted in a deep desire for perfection, for answers to life that we were never really meant to have as mortal beings. Reality is messy, confusing, oftentimes brutal and difficult. And so in life, real courage comes from facing all that it throws at you completely sober, and more importantly, the real test is not losing your humanity along the way. As humans, we are gifted and cursed with this awareness of our world around us. We see danger, evil, pitfalls, and are filled with mortal dread, especially the most intelligent, the most sensitive among us. For some, it is impossible to stop the noise, the incoming stimulus from outside, all of the negative emotions. For some, it's impossible to comprehend this idea that the world will always be chaotic and unpredictable. And so I get it. Why wouldn't you want to numb yourself, put on some blinders, and just let someone else take the reins? Let literal living gods like the Jedi take responsibility over your security and your protection. Collectively, that is what the Republic did from its earliest days. When the terrible dark side Sith appeared on the edges of the galaxy, bloodthirsty and ready to spread mayhem and destruction, the citizens of the Republic had no choice but to turn to the Jedi Order as their saviors, and granted the Jedi Order completely unchecked power. Officially, they were called defenders of the Republic, but officially there were never any boundaries or parameters set to define what this relationship actually was, which is kind of strange in a society built around standards, rules, and regulations. It's easy to understand why the Jedi were so trusted and adored. They were a truly righteous organization built around discipline and self-awareness. The Order kept its own members in line, and more importantly, as peacekeepers, as diplomats, they had the Force on their side and were capable of superhuman acts. With their training, humility, and powers, the Jedi were able to resolve the most difficult challenges the Republic faced, oftentimes with grace, efficiency, and minimal violence. Sometimes the mere presence of the Jedi was enough to de-escalate a violent situation, so I completely understand the appeal of a Jedi-led security order. Everything was great until, in rare occasions, it wasn't great, and individual Jedi fell to the dark side, like Exar Kun, Revan, Count Dooku, Anakin Skywalker, Kanye. And these failures weren't just small footnotes in history. No, they became entire chapters. The fall of these powerful Jedi all led to consequential galaxy-shattering conflicts that killed billions or destroyed billions in sneaker revenue, until finally the Jedi and the Republic itself were destroyed. The Grand Republic's experiment in surrendering its own security autonomy to an outside religious organization had ultimately failed, and I think it was always destined to fail. It's actually a testament to the Jedi that this strange partnership with the Republic existed as long as it did. Now, I know this all sounds very cynical, very anti-Jedi, but I assure you, at my core, I'm a very idealistic person. I love heroes. I love selfless individuals who do believe in things greater than themselves. This is what makes humanity great, and I think cynicism is one of the greatest threats to a cohesive society. But, videos like this are very much a thought exercise, a way for me to self-balance myself and my own beliefs. The Jedi also always sought balance internally and in the Order, but they never received it from another outside force. But what if the Jedi were treated like any other organization with its, wide set of responsibilities? What if they were treated like a law enforcement organization and given training and protocols, very clear red lines and checks and balances that were established to make everyone safer? Would this actually work? Would it have prevented the Jedi and the Republic from collapsing and spiraling into darkness? Well, in our scenario, the Jedi decide to reform, or are forced to reform, by Senator War's Reign Court after the Brendok cover-up during the late High Republic period. Senator Reign Court is seen as an anti-Jedi antagonist, or perhaps his fear of this organization as superhumans is valid, and finally, he's able to give the Jedi an opportunity to reform. It really depends on your own experiences with the Jedi and your political views on these matters. After all, the cover-up of Brendok was a pretty atrocious situation. The victims in all this, a bunch of witches, were a peaceful group of individuals. Yes, there were rumors of freighter pilots discovering weapons shipments hidden amongst basic goods sent to the Covenant there. The witches were also strange and practiced an alternative view of the Force that the Jedi didn't really understand or accept. This also made the Jedi mistrustful of these individuals who they saw as lawmen, Jedi enforcers of their own tyrannical view of the Force, and agents of the Republic. No one really knows how the fire started in the Brendok castle, but eyewitness accounts show that neither side wanted the situation to escalate as it did, but this is what happens when negotiations break down and the weapons come out. This is what happens when you have a bunch of monks parading around like law enforcement officers without actual training. What makes it even worse is these Jedi were outside of Republic jurisdiction. The Star Wars Waco Massacre, as I like to call it, the perfect opportunity for the Republic to step in and force the Jedi to reform. Not only to protect the citizens of the galaxy, but also to protect the image of this organization so it can continue to operate. There are Senate subcommittees created to oversee the transition of the Jedi into a fully recognized part of the judicial branch of the Republic government. An intermediary, a senator that is appointed and approved by both the Senate and the Jedi High Council, will be given a seat in the Jedi High Council, where they can take part in leadership conversations and also keep an eye on the Jedi and their plans. Individuals like this could approve reforms that most Jedi would be hesitant to approve of, like, for instance, forcing the Jedi to wear body cams. I don't know. At the same time, we'll have more cooperation between the Judicial Department and the Jedi Order. Maybe you can have officers who cross-train with the Jedi and observe what they're doing and give them pointers and also learn from the Jedi, because there are a lot of valuable things that the Jedi can obviously teach the normies as well. The idea here is to help the Jedi standardize and modernize their teachings, but also respect their traditions at the same time. You can add new classes, new lectures. There'll be a more strict physical and martial training regiment that during the High Republic really didn't exist. There will also be lectures about the Republic Constitution, the rights that all sentient beings have. There will need to also be ethics classes that help the Jedi see how their powers should or should not be used. And also, hopefully, this will give them more awareness on how their actions can not only affect Republic citizens, but also affect how the citizens view them as an order. Becoming a hated law enforcement organization that is attacked and protested every time they appear in public makes you a useless law enforcement organization, right? Once you destroy the trust between you and the public that you're policing, you become much worse at your job. It endangers everyone around you. And if you take a look at the Jedi, when Order 66 happened, there was very little resistance to this because the image of the Jedi had severely declined because of their participation in the war. There also needs to be a clear code in governing how the Force is used. When can a Jedi use a lightsaber to defend themselves? When can they use the Force, and how? It no longer will just be about avoiding dark thoughts and emotions. There will instead be clear red lines and protocol that will dictate how Jedi should act in the field. Force choke, exploding a person's heart, Force mind control should be like the forbidden spells in Harry Potter. And no, limiting the Jedi's offensive capabilities will not endanger them that much because they are extremely powerful to begin with. Plus, there are other ways to make them safer. And when a Jedi crosses the line and breaks a law, they aren't paraded before the High Council and judged internally. Instead, the Jedi are tried like civilians in regular court. The Jedi are not a part of the military fighting external enemies, right? They are policing the civilian populace and should be, therefore, tried as civilians. The Jedi need to be held accountable, and this is for their own safety as well. I mean, look at what happened to Ahsoka when she was framed for the Jedi Temple bombing. The Jedi had to expel her not because the evidence said she was guilty or because they believed she was guilty, but because of the optics of the situation. If they hadn't kicked her out and protected her, it would have looked like the Jedi were being corrupt. The point is, individual Jedi will no longer be able to or be forced to make all of the decisions by themselves and therefore take all responsibility for their own actions. And that's because the Jedi are just like you and me. They are imperfect. They might have the Force, but they're still people. And very few Jedi are able to fully restrain themselves and keep themselves in check. The majority of people will need parameters, training, strict boundaries of what they can or cannot do. If we just leave all these people, including a lot of children, let's be honest, to their own devices, this is going to create chaos. The Jedi will be given well thought out escalation protocols that allow them to approach every situation with a better understanding of what they should or should not do. Because let's be honest, forcing people to make split-second reactions without training is a recipe for disaster. And in this case, if things do go awry, if they go through the right protocol, they are legally protected, which is important. The inconsistency of the Jedi is one of their biggest weaknesses. A Padawan's training varied greatly depending on who their masters were. And oftentimes, just because of a lack of personnel, some Jedi were mismatched. And oftentimes results in training were poor because these Jedi Masters and Knights obtained their training through an ill-defined promotion system, usually based on experience in the field or progression in understanding the Force. But here's the thing, being a good Jedi doesn't necessarily make you a good teacher or mentor, just like being a good tradesperson, does not make you a good floor manager, right? These are separate skills. And when the Jedi are servants of the Republic and law officers, there needs to be a standardization in how this training works. Training that is based on past failures, like, say, the Padawan Massacre or the use of younglings as cannon fodder during the New Sith Wars. An organization that does not learn from its own failures and uses that to update its curriculum is an organization that will be doomed to repeat the mistakes of its past. And that's kind of what the Jedi are all about, repeating the same mistakes over and over again until they ultimately fail. The Jedi Masters of the Order have widely differing views of the Force and often train their Padawans in their own personal philosophy, potentially spreading their strengths, but also spreading their weaknesses. Some Jedi use mind tricks in an unethical way, others use the Force in very destructive and chaotic ways. Some Jedi probably don't use enough Force and are too docile and hesitant. These kind of extremes should be trained out of the system. There needs to be consistency in how a Jedi officer works and operates. The Padawan themselves also have very little choice in their own futures and oftentimes were deployed too early in their career. Teenagers might have the skill through the Force to defend themselves, but they lack the emotional maturity to handle life or death situations. Some Jedi like Barriss Offee probably should have been kept from the field completely and allowed to be in more of a support role. Others, like Anakin, should have underwent psychological profiling and been categorized as a higher risk for falling to the dark side and being emotionally imbalanced. In our own education system, when we see kids like this, we actually give them extra care and we give them well-designed curriculum to make sure that they thrive. What the Jedi did to Anakin was the opposite. They just kind of were like, well, forget about your emotions, forget about your mom who's trapped on Tatooine, just deal with it. And of course, that led to horrible things. In the case of Anakin, they should have been exceptionally careful with deploying him into the field. But, he went through a lot of trauma because they were just negligent. At the age of 12, Anakin was jumped by a blood carver assassin and forced to defend himself. He didn't have his weapon at the time, so he used the Force and the dark side to literally burn the alien from the inside out. He deeply regretted this moment, and it really traumatized him and probably led to more darker actions as he grew older. This is not young Anakin's fault, mind you. This was not the fault of a poor slave boy from Tatooine. This was the fault of the Jedi Order. The institution, his master, failed them. You see, Anakin partook in the Battle of Naboo at the age of 9, another very risky and irresponsible decision by another unorthodox Jedi Master, Qui-Gon Jinn, and Anakin managed to deliver a crucial blow against the Trade Federation control ship that essentially ended the battle. And this is why the Trade Federation would send an assassin to kill him. And, the Jedi probably should have protected this 12-year-old and never put him in a situation where he had to fight for his own life. Another big problem with the Order is a lack of standardized martial and combat training once the Jedi become Padawans. This is why the skirmish at Petranaki Arena was a major disaster for the Jedi. The majority of the Jedi Masters, Knights, and Padawan who were deployed there were improperly trained with a lightsaber. And a lot of the Jedi during this time period just kind of chose their own forms, what they enjoyed, what they were good at. And again, that was a problem. At the time, Form 6, or Naman, was quite popular amongst the Jedi Order as it was seen as a more refined type of lightsaber fighting that relied minimally on physical skill and technique, and was more heavily reliant on the Force. Many of these Jedi were also in poor shape and didn't even undergo regular fitness training or understood how to do hand-to-hand combat, which is really dumb when you're a warrior, right? And so all the Form 6 practitioners who entered the Petranaki Arena were completely unprepared for the grueling battle that awaited them, and all of the Niman practitioners, including high-level masters, were killed as a result. A more established Jedi training protocol would dictate heavy use of Form 3, which is terrific for defending against multiple blaster-wielding foes. Most of the people who used Form 3 at Petranaki did survive. Then there's also Form 4, which is for tougher, larger, and more armored creatures that need to be staggered. Form 2 is great for disarming another enemy in a duel using melee weapons. Individual Jedi have the responsibility to be well-rounded as fighters. They can't just chase their own passions and whims when they're put in this role. And that is because the better a Jedi combatant is at controlling the battlefield, the less likely they are to use lethal force. Anakin actually understood this better than most, which is why even when his own Padawan Ahsoka passed a combat review with the Jedi Temple, he gave her additional real-world training developed from years of experience in the field. Probably also gave her some concussions. But yeah, the Jedi Order had become too rigid, too traditional to really catch up with the rapidly changing galaxy. Now, there are some downsides to standardizing the Jedi, of course. The Jedi become less of a spiritual organization amongst and turn into an official branch of the Republic, which means they no longer are neutral and politically tied to the Republic, which they became anyway when they joined the JAR. One could argue that by removing their neutrality and becoming less spiritually connected to the Force directly led to the downfall of this organization. One could also argue that there are already police officers in the galaxy constrained by the legal system and protocol and unable to really solve problems in the way a Jedi could. Jedi do think outside the box and sometimes bend the law if necessary. By standardizing Jedi training and how they operate, you do have some redundancy and you lose that X factor that the Jedi once were. It should also be mentioned that a lot of the Jedi training should be kept. Learning how to use the Force is important, obviously, but so is the ethical and moral training that comes naturally with the Jedi philosophy. Also, this emphasis on discipline and self-control of one's emotions is important as well, especially when it's not taken to an extreme. Ultimately, I believe combining this traditional training with a more institutional structure that can step in when individual Jedi fail creates predictability and accountability that the Jedi Temple could really benefit from. But let me know in the comment section below what you guys think. Would the Jedi Order work better as a law enforcement agency? Would they have survived Order 66 and the Clone Wars better if they were trained to handle these kind of situations? Well, I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. And as usual, my name is Alan, reminding you that my allegiance is to the Republic, to democracy. I'll see you next time.